Yes, I liked humiliating my husband. I liked the way people looked at me when I did it. I liked the little laughs, the shocked faces, the silence right after, when everyone waited to see how far I would go. So why did everyone act so horrified when I gave him a birthday gift that simply described him in one word? It was his portrait, his face, his gift. And yes, I wrote loser across it in red letters. Was that cruel, or was it just honest? Because by the end of the night, he gave that same gift back to me. Only this time my face was inside the frame. My name is Veronica Vale. I am 34, and I work as a boutique PR consultant, so you have to understand that I knew how attention worked. Attention was never random. You had to earn it. You had to pull it toward you before someone prettier, louder, younger, or more interesting took the room. I learned that early. My older sister could walk into a family dinner wearing jeans and everyone would ask about her day. I could win a school award and still hear someone ask if she was coming later. So yes, I became sharp. I became funny. I became the woman people watched. My husband, Elias, knew that about me when he married me. He knew I liked rooms. He knew I liked reactions. He knew I could turn one sentence into a whole table looking my way. In the beginning, he said it was one of the things he loved about me. He said I made dull places feel awake. And I loved him for saying that, because Elias was not a man who gave easy praise. He was quiet, careful, almost too controlled. He worked as a compliance director, which should tell you enough. He liked rules, files, dates, and quiet mornings. I liked champagne, beautiful clothes, and a room that turned when I spoke. Somehow, for years, that worked. Every winter, he made me a private photo book for my birthday. Not expensive jewelry, not a weekend show-off trip. A photo book. Little notes under each picture. Small memories I had half forgotten. Once, when my agency almost collapsed after a client scandal, he stayed up 3 nights helping me rebuild the timeline, the emails, and the public statement. He saved me from looking careless in front of people who mattered. So no, I was not married to a useless man. But being useful is not the same as being exciting, is it? That was the part people never wanted to admit. A few months before his birthday, we were at a rooftop lounge with our usual circle. Maribel was beside me, already laughing before I finished half my sentences. Dante was across from us, watching me in the way men watch when they want you to know they are watching. Celeste had ordered tiny desserts no one liked, and Julian was telling some long story about a work trip. Elias sat next to me with his hand around a glass of sparkling water because he had an early meeting the next day. That was my husband. Always responsible. Always measured. Always making me look like the only person in the marriage who knew how to live. Someone asked how married life was after 9 years together and 6 years married, and I smiled because the room had opened a door for me. I told them marriage was easy when your husband understood his role. Maribel laughed first. Dante followed. Elias looked at me, calm as ever. I kept going. I said every woman needed one loyal background man, and mine was trained well enough to hold my purse without asking questions. A few people laughed harder than they should have. Celeste looked down at her dessert. Julian did not laugh. Elias only tapped the edge of his glass twice with one finger. Tap, tap. I knew that little habit. He did it when he was uncomfortable but too polite to say so. I read it as weakness. I read it as proof he would swallow the joke because he always did. Julian asked if I ever got tired of making my own husband the punchline. The table changed after that, not loudly, just enough. Maribel shifted in her chair. Dante smiled like he wanted the fun back. I told Julian he was being dramatic. I said Elias was my husband, and if I could not joke about my own husband, then what was marriage even for? Elias asked, softly. If jokes were still jokes when only one person was allowed to laugh. I rolled my eyes because that sounded exactly like him. Serious, heavy, a little tragic. I told him he should relax and be grateful I kept him interesting. Dante laughed again, and that gave me the room back. At least I thought it did. On the ride home, Elias asked why I needed to make him smaller in public. I told him he was too sensitive. He said he was not an object I could decorate or damage depending on my mood. I smiled at that, because of course he would say it like a policy statement. I told him he was my husband, not a stranger, and husbands belong to their wives in a way other people did not get to judge. He said belonging was not ownership. I told him not to start one of his serious speeches. Then I said the line that made him go completely quiet. I told him he was lucky a woman like me still chose him, because most women who looked like me would have upgraded years ago. His hand tightened on the steering wheel. Then he tapped one finger against it twice. Tap, tap. Same rhythm, same silence. I turned toward the window and smiled because I thought I had won again. 2 days later, while planning his birthday, I told Maribel I wanted to give Elias something personal this year. Something unforgettable. Something that would make the whole room finally see him the way I did. The first person who made it uncomfortable was Julian. Not Elias. Not his sister. Not one of those people who already thought I was too much. Julian was usually easy. He laughed late, drank slowly, and kept the peace because he hated being the man who ruined dinner. So when he looked across Celeste's backyard table and asked why I always talked to my husband like he was hired help, the whole evening bent out of shape. You have to understand, I was not trying to make a scene. I was trying to keep the room alive. Celeste's backyard dinners had become painfully dull by then. Same string lights, same grilled salmon, same people pretending their marriages were perfect while checking their phones under the table. I gave those nights oxygen. I gave people something to react to. That was not cruelty. That was social instinct. Elias sat beside me in a navy shirt I had picked because, left alone, he would have worn something that made him look like a tax form. Dante noticed the shirt and said I had improved him. I smiled and said someone had to. Maribel laughed right away. Celeste smiled, but it was smaller than usual. I kept going because the room was still mine. I said Elias was proof that even a serious man could become presentable with the right wife. Dante asked if I offered training packages. I said Elias was my private project and still not finished. A few people laughed. Elias did not. He lowered his eyes to his plate and tapped the rim twice with his finger. Tap. Tap. Same small rhythm. I read it the same way I always did. He was embarrassed. He was swallowing it. He would live. Julian set down his fork. He asked why every funny story about Elias ended with him being smaller. I blinked at him because I had not expected resistance from that corner of the table. I told him it was a joke. Maribel said the same thing almost at once, only softer. She said I teased everyone. That was not fully true, but it sounded close enough. Julian did not smile. He said teasing everyone was different from making one person the furniture in every room. The word furniture annoyed me because it sounded like something Elias would say. I told Julian not to borrow my husband's serious little language. Elias looked at me then. Calm. Too calm. He asked if I heard myself when I said things like that. I told him I heard myself perfectly. Then I gave the table the line that always worked. I said he was my husband. My husband. Not Julian's, not Celeste's, not the internet's. Mine. I said people were acting like I had insulted a stranger on the street instead of teasing the man who had chosen me. Dante lifted his glass a little, like he approved. That gave me back some heat. So I pushed harder. I said Elias belonged to me in the way husbands belong to wives after years of cleaning up their habits, fixing their clothes, and making them look better than they were. Celeste whispered my name, almost warning me. I ignored her. Elias placed his napkin beside the plate and said he was not my property. He said he was a person first, and a husband second. He said he could leave any time. The table went still. For half a second, nobody even moved their forks. I looked at him and laughed because the idea sounded absurd. Leave? Elias? The man who still kept receipts in date order and apologized to waiters when they forgot his order? The man who needed 3 days to choose a new coffee maker? I told him not to perform dignity in front of people. I told him he would not leave because nobody else would want the version of him I had spent years making tolerable. The silence after that was not the silence I wanted. It was heavy. Maribel looked down into her drink. Celeste shifted toward her husband. Dante smiled, but even he did not laugh right away. Elias only tapped the plate again. Tap, tap. Then he asked very quietly if I wanted everyone there to remember that sentence. I told him they would remember the truth, and maybe that was good for him. That should have ended the argument because I had made my position clear. Instead, the table never really came back. Celeste started clearing plates too early. Julian helped her, which he never did. Maribel stayed close to me, but her laugh was thinner. Dante tried to pull me back into fun by saying some men needed strong women because they had no spark of their own. I smiled at him because at least someone still understood the room. Later at home, Elias named the incident with the kind of detail that made me tired before he finished. He said I had called him unwanted in front of 7 people. He said I had described marriage like ownership. He said Dante had laughed because I had invited him to laugh. I told him he was jealous of Dante because Dante had confidence. Elias did not bite. He only said people should speak honestly in front of witnesses if they were proud of what they meant. I told him that sounded like another one of his weak, serious sentences. He went quiet after that, and of course I took it as proof that he had no answer. The next morning, while ordering decorations for his birthday, I kept hearing Julian's furniture comment in my head. I hated that. So I opened a custom art website and searched for portrait commissions. If people thought I made Elias the punchline too often, maybe his birthday needed one joke big enough to settle the matter. The portrait idea did not become real right away. At first, it was only a tab open on my laptop, hidden between catering options and birthday decorations. Custom portrait, oil-style print, fast delivery, elegant frame. You have to understand, I was not thinking of it as cruel. I was thinking of it as clever. A personal gift with a private joke built into it. That was my language. That was how I made rooms move. I could already imagine Elias opening the wrapping, expecting something soft and sentimental, then seeing himself the way I had been seeing him for years. Serious face, quiet eyes, perfect posture, and one honest word across the middle. Loser. It made me smile before I even placed the order. The next public moment came at Celeste and Graham's anniversary dinner, and it annoyed me before we even sat down. The restaurant was too polished, too soft, too focused on them. There were candles on the table, gold menus, tiny flower arrangements, and a waiter who spoke like he was afraid of waking someone. Celeste looked beautiful, and everyone kept telling her so. Graham gave a small speech about loving her for 12 years, and people acted like he had invented marriage. I smiled because that was what a good guest did. But inside, the room felt wrong. Nobody was watching me. Dante arrived late, kissed Celeste on both cheeks, and told her she looked incredible. I laughed like it did not bother me. Maribel caught my eye and gave me that little smile she used when she knew I wanted attention back. So I took it. After the first course, someone asked Elias how work was, and he began answering in that flat, careful way he had. Policies, audits, reviews. I almost yawned into my wine. Dante gave me a look across the table, the kind that said he knew exactly what I was thinking. So I leaned back and told everyone Elias could make a fire alarm sound like a quarterly report. Maribel laughed. Dante laughed louder. Even Graham smiled because he was trying to be polite. Elias stopped speaking. His hand moved to the stem of his water glass, and he tapped it twice. Tap, tap. There it was again, his little white flag. I smiled wider. I said some women got men who wrote poems, some women got men who planned surprises, and I got a man who could alphabetize panic. A few people laughed, but Julian did not. Celeste looked down at her plate again. Nadia, Elias's sister, sat near the end of the table watching me with that cold family patience she had. I had not even known she was coming until we arrived. Elias had mentioned it once, and of course I had forgotten because Nadia always acted like a quiet side character in our life. Dante said at least Elias carried bags well. I liked that. It gave me another step. I said Elias was useful, and that was not nothing. Some husbands were handsome, some were rich, some were exciting. Mine was dependable, and there was dignity in that if he did not ask for too much credit. The table went tight. Not silent yet, tight. Nadia asked if I heard how I sounded when I talked about her brother. I told her I sounded honest. She said honesty did not need an audience every time. That irritated me because it was almost good. I told her not to act like Elias was helpless. I said he was a grown man. If he hated my jokes so much, he could stop sitting there. Elias looked at me then. Not angry. Not wounded enough to satisfy me. Calm. He asked if I wanted everyone at that table to know exactly what I thought of him. The question was soft, but it cut through the candles and plates and little anniversary smiles. I should have laughed it away, but the room was waiting. Dante was watching. Maribel was waiting for me to land the line. So I did. I told Elias maybe everyone should know. Maybe it was good for people to understand that I had spent years dragging him into rooms he never would have entered without me. Maybe it was good for him to remember that being married to me was the best social gift he ever received. His finger touched the glass again. Tap. Tap. Julian pushed his chair back a little, not enough to leave, just enough to show he was done pretending it was funny. Nadia folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. Maribel's laugh came late this time. Dante still smiled, but he glanced at Celeste before he did. I saw all of it and chose the part that served me. The room was uncomfortable because I had said something bold. People always confused bold women with cruel ones when the joke landed too close. After dinner, while Elias paid for our drinks at the bar, Nadia came up beside me and said his silence was not permission. I told her Elias had a voice and could use it whenever he wanted. She said he had used it. I just preferred when he stopped. That sentence stayed under my skin the whole ride home. Not because she was right, because it sounded like something worth proving wrong. When we got back, I opened the portrait website again. This time, I uploaded the best photo of Elias I could find. A clean suit, straight shoulders, calm face. The artist's preview box asked if I wanted any text added. I hovered over it for a moment. Then I wrote that I wanted space across the portrait for one red word. I did not type the word yet. Not there. That part, I wanted to do myself. The artist sent the first preview on a Tuesday afternoon while Elias was still at work, and the apartment was quiet enough for me to hear the refrigerator click on and off. I had hidden the commission under a fake folder on my laptop because I wanted the birthday gift to feel like a reveal, not a discussion. You have to understand, timing mattered. If I showed people the joke too early, they would start trying to soften it. Maribel would ask if I was sure. Celeste would make that worried face. Julian would probably say something heavy about dignity. Elias would stand there with his calm eyes and turn a sharp idea into another serious conversation. So I kept it mine. The file opened slowly, and then his face filled the screen. The artist had done a better job than I expected. Elias looked handsome in the portrait. Not exciting. Not dangerous. Not the kind of man Dante would ever worry about, but handsome in a still, steady way. His shoulders were straight. His eyes looked softer than they looked in real life. The mouth was not smiling, but it was not cold either. For a few seconds, the room went quiet around me. I remembered the night my PR agency almost collapsed, when Elias sat at our dining table with 3 laptops open and rebuilt my client timeline while I paced barefoot across the floor. He had not made a speech. He had not called me careless. He had only asked for dates, emails, names, and facts. By morning, I had a clean statement and a path out. That was the thing about him. He could save you without making it look romantic. I stared at the portrait and saw that version of him for longer than I wanted. Then I closed the preview and stood up too fast. A flattering portrait did not erase 6 years of feeling like I was married to a man who left all the light in the room for me to create. It did not erase the way he sat silent while I carried every dinner. It did not erase how ordinary he made life feel when I needed people to look. So I opened the file again and zoomed in on the space across his chest. That was where the word would go. Not typed by the artist, not neat. Mine, red, ugly, honest. That evening, Elias came home while I was wrapping early decorations in the guest room. The portrait itself had not arrived yet, but the frame samples, tissue paper, and black ribbon were spread across the bed. He stood in the doorway and asked if I was planning something for his birthday. Soft, almost careful. I told him it was very personal. His face changed in a way I did not expect. He looked touched, not suspicious, not defensive. Touched. That tiny look annoyed me because it made the gift feel heavier than I wanted. I turned away and folded the tissue paper. He asked if this year was going to be different between us. I said it could be, if he stopped treating every joke like a wound. He said he did not need every room to love him. He only needed his wife to stop offering him up for laughs. There it was again. Serious. Heavy. I told him he was making a birthday surprise into a therapy session. He came closer, picked up one of the empty frame corners from the bed, and tapped it twice with his finger. Tap. Tap. I smiled because even his curiosity looked nervous. Then Nadia came over 2 nights later with a box of old photos Elias's mother wanted displayed at the party. I did not invite her into the guest room, but she saw enough. The ribbons, the wrapping paper, the large covered shape leaning against the closet wall. She asked if Elias's birthday was going to be a celebration or another performance. I laughed because of course Nadia would say it like she was protecting some sacred man from his own wife. I told her Elias had married a woman with a backbone, and she still acted offended by that. Nadia did not raise her voice. She only asked why my backbone always needed an audience. I told her she was bitter because Elias was finally with someone people noticed. She looked at me for a long second, then took out her phone to check a message. The screen tilted toward her body. I did not care. Nadia always acted like every sentence was evidence of something. Elias came in before she left, and the air tightened. Nadia asked him if he wanted her to stay. He said no, calmly, and thanked her for the photos. That made me laugh after she was gone. I told him his sister acted like I was dangerous. He said danger did not always look loud. I told him not to start. He said he was not my thing, not my prop, and not the dull man I kept dragging into jokes when I needed attention. I told him he was my husband, and husbands belong to the life their wives built around them. He said belonging was not ownership. I said that sounded nice, but marriage was not a motivational poster. He looked toward the covered portrait. Then he asked if the gift would show what I really thought of him. I told him yes. He tapped the covered frame twice as he passed it. Tap, tap. Then he went to bed. The next morning, I bought the red paint marker. When the finished portrait arrived, I locked the guest room door, uncapped the marker, and wrote loser across his chest in letters thick enough for the back row to see. The day of Elias's birthday felt like a stage I had built with my own hands. That was the part I loved most. Not the food, not the flowers, not even the gift. The control. I knew where everyone would stand. I knew which lamp made the living room look warmer. I knew the birthday table needed champagne glasses on the left because people always reached for them when they were uncomfortable, and I wanted both hands free when the portrait came out. You have to understand, I was good at this. My whole career was built on rooms, timing, and public reaction. A birthday party was just a smaller campaign with better cake. The wrapped portrait stood in the guest room until the last hour, taller than the chair beside it, covered in black paper and tied with red ribbon. I had chosen the ribbon on purpose. It matched the letters. Loser. Red. Thick. Impossible to miss. I had practiced the reveal in my head all morning. First, I would make a sweet little speech. I would tell everyone Elias deserved a gift that showed how well I knew him. Then he would unwrap it. The room would go silent for 1 second, then someone would laugh, probably Dante, and everyone else would follow because people needed permission to react. That was how rooms worked. Maribel arrived while I was arranging candles around the cake. She wore a silver blouse and the wrong expression. Usually she entered my house already smiling, already ready to ask what trouble I had planned. This time her eyes went to the guest room door, then back to me. She asked if the portrait was still the gift. I told her of course it was. She asked if I was sure Elias would take it the right way. That annoyed me. The right way. As if Elias had ever taken anything the right way unless it was wrapped in quiet and stamped with approval. I told her it was a joke and that everyone had become strangely fragile around my own husband. Maribel gave a small laugh, but it came late. Too late. She said she only wanted the night to stay fun. I told her fun was exactly what I was giving them. She looked toward the hallway and said nothing. That was the first time I reached for her usual excitement and found empty air. I hated that, so I turned to the person who still knew how to enjoy a sharp edge. Dante arrived 10 minutes later with a bottle of expensive whiskey and a grin that made the room feel younger. He asked where the famous gift was. I told him hidden until the right moment. He said Elias needed something memorable because patient men were boring to celebrate. I smiled. There it was. The room coming back to me. Celeste came with Graham. Julian came too, though I had not been sure he would. Nadia arrived last, carrying a plain card and looking around my living room like she was counting exits. Elias came down from our bedroom in the dark green shirt I had laid out for him. He looked good. I hated that I noticed. He thanked people one by one. He hugged his sister. He shook Dante's hand without giving him the satisfaction of tension. He stood beside the cake while everyone sang, and for a moment the party looked normal, almost kind. Then he found me near the guest room door. He asked if my gift was meant to make peace. Clean. Quiet. Final in a way I did not like. I told him it was meant to make things honest. He looked at me for a few seconds and I saw that same tired sadness from before. Not dramatic. Not begging. Just there. He said he hoped honesty was what I really wanted. I told him he should stop acting like a wounded saint. Then I said the one thing he could not brush away. I told him he had spent years disappearing into silence, leaving me to carry every dinner, every party, every room, and then acting surprised that people noticed me more than him. His face changed because that part was true. He did withdraw. He did leave me to become the loud one. He could not deny it, and he did not try. He only said that being quiet had never given me permission to make him my material. I said he should be grateful I gave him any spotlight at all. He asked if I wanted the gift opened in front of everyone. I said yes. He asked once. Only once. Then his hand went to the wrapped frame leaning against the guest room wall. 2 fingers touched the wood under the paper. Tap. Tap. I almost laughed because even then he looked nervous. Even then he looked like a man preparing to swallow what I gave him. He carried the portrait into the living room himself, which made it better. People turned. Phones came up. Not all the way, just enough. Maribel stayed near the hallway. Dante stood beside the fireplace with his drink raised. Nadia watched her brother, not me. I stepped into the center of the room and told everyone that Elias deserved a personal portrait because birthdays were about being seen. A few people smiled. Julian did not. Elias stood beside me calm, hands on the wrapping. I felt the whole room waiting. Mine again. Finally mine. I told him to open it. Elias pulled the black paper from the portrait slowly, like he was giving the room time to prepare itself. At first, everyone saw only the painting. His face, his shoulders. The calm expression the artist had made softer than the real one. For one small second, the room looked almost touched. Even Maribel leaned forward. Then Elias turned the frame fully toward the guests, and the red letters cut across his chest. Loser. Thick. Wet-looking. Mine. The room did not laugh. That was the first thing that went wrong. Dante gave one short sound, then stopped when nobody followed him. Celeste covered her mouth. Julian looked at me, not with anger, but with a tired kind of disgust that made me want to slap the expression off his face with words. I laughed louder than the silence. I told them it was a joke. I told them birthdays needed honesty. I told Elias not to stand there like a wounded statue because the gift described him perfectly. Elias tapped the frame twice. Tap, tap. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. A finished one. He said the first tap had been at the rooftop lounge when I called him my background man. Then the backyard plate, after I said nobody else would want him. Then the restaurant glass, after I told everyone he was useful and should not ask for credit. Then the wrapped frame when I told him the gift would show what I really thought. Every tap, every room, every witness. My mouth went dry, but I kept my chin high. I said he was making a party dramatic. Nadia lifted her phone and said the party was only the latest one, not the first. Julian said the joke had stopped being a joke when nobody was allowed to stop laughing. Maribel was no longer beside me. She had moved into the hallway. Dante slipped his phone into his pocket and stepped away from the fireplace like I had become contagious. Elias said he was not going to argue with my version anymore. The version had been recorded enough. Videos, messages, voice notes. People who had heard me call him my property. People who had heard me say he should be grateful. I reached for the portrait because I needed it out of his hands. If I could take it, I could still control the image. Elias did not pull back. I grabbed the side of the frame too hard, the canvas ripped through the center, and my own forward step carried my face straight into the torn opening. The frame dropped around my neck. The room gasped. I looked down. The red word loser sat under my chin. Elias only said the gift had found the right owner. Phones were already up. Later, one protection and no contact order came with a move-out deadline through his attorney. I left the house for a short-term rental. I paid for the move myself. Maribel stopped answering, and Julian stayed in Elias's circle. Dante deleted his party story and stopped inviting me anywhere. Clients at my agency began asking why my private life looked like a crisis campaign. I thought calling him a loser made me powerful. It only showed everyone how much I needed someone beneath me. The torn portrait stayed in a storage bag near the door. I gave my husband one word and he made sure my face wore it.